Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the window of Earth's orbital station, watching the alien ships arrive. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. The ships looked like crystals that had been grown instead of built. They moved through space without making a sound, leaving trails of light behind them. "They're here," said Dr. James Chen, walking up beside her. He was holding a data pad with all the information Earth had managed to gather about their visitors. It wasn't much. The aliens had only contacted Earth 3 days ago with a simple message. "We must speak." Elena nodded. She had been chosen to represent humanity in this first contact. It was the most important job anyone had ever been given. The weight of it made her stomach tight with worry. The largest alien ship stopped near the station. A beam of light connected the two vessels, and soon Elena found herself face to face with something that looked like it was made of living crystal. The being was tall, maybe 8 feet, and its body seemed to glow from within. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music played on glass instruments. "I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Galactic Preservation Council," the alien said. "I have lived for 30,000 of your years. I have seen the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. I am here to save yours." Elena tried not to show how amazed she was. 30,000 years. This creature was older than all of human history. "I'm Captain Elena Vasquez. I speak for Earth and humanity. What do you need to save us from?" Kethvar's crystal body dimmed slightly, like a light being turned down. "The Devourers," he said. "They are coming for this galaxy, as they have come for 17 others before it." The air between them shimmered, and suddenly Elena could see images floating in the space around her. She gasped. The images showed empty space where galaxies should have been. Not destroyed galaxies, but spaces where nothing existed at all. Not even darkness, just emptiness that hurt to look at. "They consume everything," Kethvar continued. "Stars, planets, space itself. When they are finished with a place, it is as if that place never existed at all. We have been fighting them for millions of years. We hold them back, but we cannot stop them completely." Elena studied the images. She could see massive structures floating in space, bigger than Earth's moon. These were the barriers the Council had built to keep the Devourers away. Around them, thousands of alien ships patrolled in careful patterns. "How long have you been holding them back?" she asked. 3 million years in this galaxy. We lost our home galaxy before that, and the one before that." Kethvar's voice carried the weight of all those years. "We survive by being careful, by being smart, by not taking risks." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "And humanity? Your species has just learned to travel between stars. You are children playing with fire. We have studied your history. You are violent, unpredictable, and reckless. You fight wars over small differences. You take terrible risks for no good reason." The images changed to show scenes from human history. Wars, disasters, people doing dangerous things just to prove they could. Elena had to admit it looked pretty bad when you saw it all together like that. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "Stay in your solar system. Send us resources, metal, food, fuel. We will protect you. But you must not come to the war. You would only make things worse." Dr. Chen stepped forward. He had been listening quietly, taking notes. "Can we see the data about these Devourers? How they work, how fast they move, how they attack?" Kethvar hesitated. "That information is classified. Only Council species may access it." "How do we become a Council species?" Elena asked. "Survive for at least 50,000 years without destroying yourselves. Prove you can be trusted with dangerous knowledge. Show that you can follow orders without question." Kethvar's crystal form seemed to grow brighter. "Your species has existed for less than 1,000 centuries. You have had space travel for barely 50 years. You are not ready." Elena looked at Dr. Chen. They had talked about this possibility on the way to the station. What if the aliens wanted humanity to sit on the sidelines? What if they didn't want help? "And if we say no?" Elena asked. "If we decide to fight anyway?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Kethvar's glow became cold and harsh. "Then you will die. And your deaths will accomplish nothing except to make our job harder. The Devourers will add your biomass to their strength, and we will have to clean up the mess you make. Dr. Chen was studying his data pad. Elena could see him frowning at something. He looked up at Kethvar. These consumption rates you've shown us, the speed the Devourers are moving, it's getting faster, isn't it? Kethvar paused for just a moment. It was barely noticeable, but Elena caught it. The cycles are well understood. The Devourers become active for a period, then dormant. They have been dormant before. They will be dormant again. When? Dr. Chen pressed. When will they go dormant this time? Soon. Perhaps in a few thousand years. Elena felt her heart skip. A few thousand years was nothing to a being who had lived for 30,000. But to humanity it might as well be forever. What if they don't go dormant? What if this time is different? It is not different, Kethvar said, but Elena heard something in his voice. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear. Dr. Chen was working on his data pad again, running calculations. The energy output patterns don't match your projections, he said quietly to Elena. If these numbers are right, the Devourers aren't following the same pattern they used before. They're accelerating. Elena looked back at Kethvar. How many other species have you given this same speech to? How many times have you told a young race to stay home and be safe? Many times. It is the only way. How many of those species are still alive? Kethvar's glow dimmed again. Survival is not guaranteed, but following our guidance gives the best chance. That's not what I asked. Elena stepped closer to the crystal being. How many of the species you told to stay safe are still alive? The silence stretched on for long seconds. Finally, Kethvar spoke. 17 species have joined the Council in the last 1,000,000 years. 8 remain. Elena felt cold. More than half of the species that had followed the Council's guidance were gone. What happened to the other 9? The Devourers found them eventually. Despite our protection, they were consumed. But they lived longer than they would have if they had fought. Dr. Chen looked up from his calculations. Captain, we need to talk. Privately. Elena nodded to Kethvar. Give us a moment. Dr. Chen led her to the corner of the room. The numbers don't add up, he whispered. Based on what? They've shown us the Devourers should have consumed this galaxy already. The fact that we're still here means either their data is wrong, or something has changed. Changed how? I think the Devourers are preparing for something big. All this accelerating consumption, it's not random. They're gathering energy for something massive. Elena looked back at Kethvar, who was waiting patiently. The alien's crystal form reflected the light from the station's windows, creating patterns on the walls like a prism. What do you think we should do? I think hiding behind barriers and hoping the enemy gets tired is not a strategy, Dr. Chen said. I think it's just a way to die slowly instead of quickly. Elena nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. She walked back to Kethvar. We've made our decision, she said. Humanity will not hide in our solar system. We will not sit behind your barriers and hope for the best. If these Devourers are coming for our galaxy, then they're coming for us, too. We'd rather meet them on our feet than on our knees. Kethvar's entire body flared bright with what Elena guessed was anger. You will doom your species for pride. Maybe, Elena said, but we've never been good at sitting on the sidelines, especially when the fight matters. The alien ambassador stared at her for a long moment. Then his form began to fade as he prepared to return to his ship. The galaxy was warned, he said. What happens next is on your heads. Elena watched him go. Through the window, she could see the crystal ships beginning to move away from Earth Station. Soon, they would report back to their council that humanity had refused their protection. Think we made the right choice? Dr. Chen asked. Elena looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, things that 8 galaxies were moving toward them. The most advanced species in the galaxy had just told them to hide. Every logical argument said they should listen. Ask me again in a few years, she said. Assuming we're still alive to ask. But deep in her heart, she knew they had made the only choice they could. Humanity had never learned to back down from a fight, especially when everything was at stake. They weren't about to start now. Admiral Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the massive alien structures grow larger on the screen. The terminus line stretched across space like a wall made of light and metal. Behind it, the safe part of the galaxy continued, its normal existence. Ahead lay the territory of the Devourers. 6 months had passed since Earth's meeting with the Galactic Council. 6 months of frantic preparation, building weapons, training crews, and converting every ship they could find into something that might survive a battle with creatures that ate reality itself. "Contact from the Council fleet," reported Commander Sarah Kim from her position at the communications station. "They're ordering us to stop and turn back." Torres looked at his small fleet of 200 ships. Most of them had been cargo haulers and colony transports just weeks ago. Now they carried every weapon humanity could build, and every brave soul willing to fight an impossible war. "Tell them we're here to help," Torres said. "Sir, they're moving to intercept us. 50,000 alien ships are forming a blockade." Through the view screen, Torres could see the Council ships moving into position. They were beautiful and deadly, designed by species that had been fighting this war for millions of years. His own ships looked like flying scrapyards in comparison. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. He turned to see Dr. Chen, who had been assigned to the fleet as their expert on the Devourers. "Are you sure about this?" Torres looked at the man who had convinced Earth's government that the Council was wrong about their strategy. "Too late to turn back now, Doc. Besides, you're the one who said their numbers don't add up." Dr. Chen nodded, but he looked worried. "The Devourers aren't following their historical pattern. If I'm right, this is the beginning of something much bigger than the Council realizes. But if I'm wrong, if you're wrong, we all die a little sooner than we would have anyway." Torres turned back to the screen. The Council ships were getting closer. "Open a channel to their commander." The screen flickered, and suddenly Torres was looking at a being that looked like it was made of flowing water held in a roughly human shape. When it spoke, its voice sounded like waves crashing on ashore. "Human vessels, this is Fleet Commander Veltar of the Council Defense Force. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. This area is restricted to authorized military personnel only. Commander Veltar, this is Admiral Torres of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet. We're here to assist in the defense of the galaxy. Assistance was not requested and is not welcome. Your presence will only interfere with carefully planned defensive strategies that have kept this galaxy safe for 3 million years." Torres felt his temper rising. "Safe? You call this safe? The Devourers have consumed 17 galaxies. How? Is that safe? We have prevented them from consuming this one. That is what matters. For how long? What happens when your barriers fail? What happens when they decide to push harder than before?" Before Veltar could answer, alarms started going off on both human and alien ships. The massive barrier structures of the terminus line were flashing red warnings. Something was happening on the other side. "What is that?" Torres asked. Dr. Chen was already working at his station, trying to interpret the alien warning systems. "It's the Devourers. They're launching an attack. A big one." Through the view screen, Torres could see space itself beginning to twist and bend near the barriers. Reality looked like it was melting, creating holes through which things that shouldn't exist began to pour into normal space. The Devourers didn't look like ships or creatures. They looked like pieces of darkness that had learned to move. They flowed through space like oil, leaving trails of nothingness behind them. Where they passed, stars flickered and went out. "All Council ships, Defensive Formation 7, Veltar, commanded. Maintain minimum safe distance from the barriers." Torres watched as the alien fleet began to pull back to what they considered a safe position. It was a reasonable military decision. The barriers were the most important thing to protect. If they fell, the Devourers would pour into the galaxy. But Torres could see that the barriers were already failing. The massive structures were being eaten away from the inside by creatures that existed partially outside of normal reality. Soon, there would be gaps large enough for the devourers to pour through. All human ships, Torres announced over the fleet communications. This is it. This is what we came here for. Admiral, Commander Kim said, the council ships are ordering us to fall back with them. Tell them thanks, but no thanks. Torres looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared, but they were determined. We didn't come all this way to watch from the back row. He opened a channel to the entire human fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Torres. The barriers are failing. The council is pulling back to secondary positions, that's their choice. But we didn't come here to hide behind walls, we came here to fight. On the screen, one of the barrier stations exploded in a ball of light that hurt to look at. Through the gap, more devourers began to pour into normal space. Human vessels, you must withdraw. Veltar's voice crackled over the communication system. Direct engagement with devourers is suicide. No ship can survive contact with them. Torres smiled grimly. Commander, we're about to find out if that's true. All human ships attack formation. Target the devourers coming through the gap. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for centuries. Instead of retreating to a safe distance, the human fleet charged directly at the creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. Captain Sarah Kim, commanding the converted cargo hauler New Horizon, was the first to make contact. Her ship wasn't designed for war, but her crew had loaded it with every explosive they could carry. When a devourer reached out with what might have been a tentacle made of pure entropy, Kim didn't try to dodge. This is for everyone they've killed, she said, and flew her ship directly into the creature's center of mass. The explosion was visible from thousands of miles away. When the light faded, both the New Horizon and the devourer were gone. But where the creature had been, space looked normal again. The twisted reality around it had been restored to its proper state. Did that just happen? Dr. Chen asked, staring at his instruments. It worked, Torres breathed. It actually worked. Across the fleet, human ships began ramming attacks, boarding actions, and suicide runs against creatures that the Council had been afraid to engage directly for millions of years. The converted mining ship Deep Dig used its drilling equipment to bore into a devourer's core. The passenger liner Star Bright detonated its fusion reactors inside another creature's feeding appendage. Most of the human ships were destroyed in these attacks, but something amazing was happening. For every human ship lost, a devourer died too, and they were staying dead. How is this possible? Veltar asked over the open channel. His water-like form was vibrating with shock. Dr. Chen was studying his readings, trying to understand what was happening. I think I know, he said. The devourers exist partially outside normal reality. That's what makes them so dangerous, but it also makes them vulnerable to certain types of quantum interference. In English, Doc, Torres said, still watching his ships fight creatures that shouldn't exist. Humans evolved on Earth during a period of high quantum instability. Solar flares, magnetic field variations, cosmic ray bombardment. Our neural patterns are naturally resistant to quantum disruption. We can get close to the devourers without being immediately dissolved. On the screen, another human ship was making an attack run. This time, the pilot managed to plant explosives on the devourers, surface and escape before they detonated. The creature writhed and then collapsed into normal matter. They're retreating, someone called out. Torres couldn't believe it. The devourers were actually pulling back through the gap in the barriers. For the first time in recorded history, they had been forced to retreat from a battle. The human fleet regrouped, counting their losses. They had started with 200 ships. Now they had 63, but they had driven off an attack that should have broken through the galaxy's defenses. Veltar's image appeared on the screen again. His liquid form was moving in patterns that Dr. Chen said indicated extreme agitation. What have you done? The alien commander asked. What needed to be done? Torres replied. We fought them and we won. You don't understand. The devourers have never retreated before. Never. They attack until they are destroyed or until they consume everything in their path. Retreat is not in their nature. Torres looked at the gap in the barriers where his people had just held the line against impossible odds. Maybe their nature just changed. Dr. Chen was still studying his instruments. "Admiral, I'm reading something strange. The devourers that we destroyed, they're not completely gone. There are quantum echoes, like they left something behind when they died." "What kind of something?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, the other devourers are interested in it. They're not just retreating. They're studying us." Torres felt a chill run down his spine. Through the gap in the barriers, he could see more devourers gathering in the darkness beyond. But they weren't attacking. They were watching. "Veltar," he said, "we need to talk. All of us. Because I don't think this fight is over. I think it's just beginning." Dr. James Chen stood in the laboratory aboard Kepler Station, humanity's forward command post in what used to be Devourer territory. 2 years had passed since the battle at the Terminus Line, and the human fleet had established footholds in sectors that the Council had written off as lost forever. The laboratory was filled with equipment that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. Containment fields held samples of Devourer material, if it could even be called material. The fragments looked like pieces of darkness that had been frozen in time, constantly shifting between existing and not existing. "Any progress?" asked Admiral Torres, entering the lab with Ambassador Kethvar walking beside him. The crystal alien had become the Council's official liaison to humanity, though Chen suspected it was more to keep an eye on them than to help them. "More than I wish we had," Chen replied, looking up from his instruments. "These things are worse than we thought, much worse." He activated a holographic display that showed the structure of a devourer fragment at the quantum level. The image hurt to look at directly, like trying to stare at something that existed in too many dimensions at once. "They're not just consuming matter and energy," Chen explained. "They're consuming information itself, the basic quantum data that tells the universe how to exist. When they eat a star, they don't just take its mass and heat. They erase the fact that the star ever existed." Kethvar's crystal form dimmed with what Chen had learned to recognize as distress. "This is known. It is why we built the barriers, to contain the damage." "No, you don't understand," Chen said, adjusting the display. "The damage isn't being contained, it's spreading. Every time a devourer consumes something, it creates quantum instability that affects nearby space-time. The barriers are slowing it down, but they're not stopping it." Torres frowned. "What does that mean for the galaxy?" Chen pointed to a complex equation floating in the holographic display. "It means your containment strategy is ultimately pointless. The universe isn't just losing matter to the devourers. It's losing its ability to exist coherently. Eventually, the quantum instability will reach critical mass and reality will collapse in on itself." "How long?" Torres asked. "At the current rate? Maybe 50,000 years, but the rate is accelerating. Each consumed galaxy makes the process faster." Kethvar's form flared brighter. "Your calculations are wrong. The devourers go dormant. The damage stops spreading when they sleep." "That's what your records say," Chen agreed. "But I don't think they're going dormant this time. I think they're preparing for something big. Something final." He changed the display to show energy readings from across devourer territory. "Look at this. They're not randomly consuming anymore. They're gathering energy in specific patterns. It's like they're building something." Torres studied the patterns. "Building what?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, it requires the energy output of entire galaxies to power it." Kethvar moved closer to the display, his crystal form reflecting the light in complex patterns. "If this is true, then the war is already lost. We should evacuate to another galaxy while we still can." "Running away won't work," Chen said. "The quantum instability will follow us. Once it reaches critical mass, it won't matter where we are. The collapse will affect all of space-time." Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying the data. "What if we could communicate with them? Find out what they're really trying to do?" Both Chen and Kethvar stared at him. The alien ambassador spoke first. "Communication with devourers has been attempted many times. Every species that tried was consumed instantly. They do not communicate, they only consume." Every other species, Torres corrected. But we're different. We can get close to them without being dissolved. Maybe we can survive long enough to make contact. Chen felt his stomach drop. Admiral, that's insane. Direct neural contact with a devourer would be like trying to have a conversation with a black hole. The quantum interference alone would destroy any normal consciousness. But I'm not normal, am I? Said a voice from the laboratory entrance. They turned to see Sarah Martinez walking in. She was one of the few survivors of the battle at the terminus line, a quantum engineer who had somehow lived through 3 direct encounters with devourers. Sarah, we've talked about this, Chen said. The exposure you've already had is dangerous. Enough. We don't know what long-term effects I dream about them, she interrupted. Every night since the battle, I see flashes of something that might be memories or thoughts or I don't know what to call them, but they're trying to tell me something. Kethvar's entire form pulsed with alarm. Devourer contamination. The human should be quarantined immediately. I'm not contaminated, Martinez said firmly. I'm adapted. There's a difference. She walked over to the containment field holding the devourer fragments. As she approached, the dark material inside began to react, shifting and moving in response to her presence. They know I'm here, she said quietly. They remember me from the battle and I remember them. Chen checked his instruments. The quantum field readings around Martinez were unlike anything he had seen before. Her neural patterns were somehow synchronized with the devourer fragments, creating a stable interface between human consciousness and whatever passed for devourer thought. This is impossible, Kethvar said. Devourers do not think, they do not remember. They are entropy given form, nothing more. Then explain this, Martinez said, placing her hand near the containment field. The devourer fragments responded immediately, organizing themselves into complex patterns that resembled mathematical equations. Torres leaned forward, studying the patterns. What are they trying to say? Martinez closed her eyes, concentrating. It's hard to understand. Their thoughts aren't like ours. They don't think in words or images, they think in quantum states, probability clouds, mathematical relationships. She paused, her face scrunched in concentration. They're not just consuming randomly. They're solving a problem, a very big problem. What kind of problem? Chen asked. The universe is broken, Martinez said, opening her eyes. Something damaged the basic structure of space-time a long time ago, and it's been spreading ever since. The devourers are trying to fix it. Kethvar's form flickered with disbelief. They are destroying everything. No, Martinez said, looking at the alien ambassador. They're performing surgery, cutting out the infected parts before the damage spreads to other dimensional layers. Chen felt his understanding of everything shift. The quantum instability we've been measuring. It's not new. It's been there all along. Exactly, Martinez said. The devourers aren't causing the universe to become unstable. They're responding to instability that already existed. They're the universe's immune system. Torres ran his hand through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. So the galaxies they've consumed were already damaged. The devourers cut them out to prevent the infection from spreading. Martinez turned back to the containment field. The fragments inside were moving in increasingly complex patterns. But they're running out of time. The infection is spreading faster than they can cut it out. What kind of infection? Chen asked. Martinez was quiet for a long moment, communicating with the fragments in ways that had no human words. When she spoke again, her voice was troubled. Time itself is sick. Someone, somewhere, conducted experiments with temporal mechanics that went very wrong. They created a cascade effect that's been spreading through the quantum foam for millions of years. It's like a cancer in the structure of reality itself. Kethvar's form had dimmed to almost nothing. The first ones, the records speak of a species that vanished long ago. They were experimenting with time travel when they disappeared. They didn't disappear, Martinez said. They're still there, trapped in a temporal loop at the point where they broke causality. They've been screaming for help for millions of years, but their cries are what's causing the damage to spread. Chen stared at his instruments, everything finally making sense. The Devourers aren't evil. They're trying to save the universe by amputating the infected parts. But it's not working because they can't treat the source of the infection. Because the source exists outside normal time. Torres finished. They can't reach it with their current methods. Martinez nodded. That's why they're gathering energy. They're preparing to attempt a different kind of surgery, one that might cure the infection instead of just containing it. Or it might destroy everything, Kethvar said. The universe is dying anyway, Martinez replied. At least this way, there's a chance to save it. Torres looked around the laboratory at the alien technology, the impossible devourer fragments, and the woman who had somehow learned to speak with creatures that ate galaxies. What do they need from us? He asked. Martinez closed her eyes again, concentrating on the patterns in the containment field. A translator, someone who can survive contact with the temporal anomaly and communicate with the trapped consciousness, someone whose quantum signature is flexible enough to bridge the gap between normal reality and broken time. A human, Chen said. A very specific human, Martinez corrected. Someone who's already been exposed to devourer quantum fields and survived. Someone whose neural patterns have been adapted by the exposure. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Torres. Someone like me. Sarah Martinez floated in the medical bay of the deep space exploration ship Determination, connected to more monitoring equipment than she had ever seen in one place. Dr. Chen watched the readouts with growing concern as her brain patterns shifted between human normal and something else entirely. Her neural activity is off the charts, he reported to Admiral Torres, who stood watching through the observation window. Whatever she experienced in contact with that devourer fragment, it changed her on a fundamental level. Torres studied Martinez's unconscious form. She had volunteered to make full neural contact with the captured devourer material 3 days ago. Since then, she had been in and out of consciousness, speaking in languages that didn't exist and drawing mathematical equations that hurt to look at. Is she still human? He asked. Genetically, yes, but her consciousness has been expanded in ways I don't understand. She's processing information at quantum levels that shouldn't be possible for biological brains. Chen adjusted one of the monitors. The good news is she's stable. The bad news is I have no idea what she's becoming. Ambassador Kethvar entered the medical bay, his crystal form dimmed with exhaustion. He had been in constant communication with the Council, trying to explain humanity's latest impossible plan. The Council has made its decision, he announced. They will not support this mission. The risk is too great. If you are wrong about the Devourer's true nature, you could accelerate the universe's destruction by millions of years. Torres turned from the window. And if we're right? Then you may save everything. But the Council cannot take that risk based on the visions of one contaminated human. I'm not contaminated, Martinez said weakly, opening her eyes. I'm connected. Chen immediately began checking her vital signs. Sarah, how do you feel? Like, I've been having a conversation with the universe itself, she said, sitting up slowly. And it's been trying to tell me something very important. She looked at Kethvar with eyes that seemed to see more than they should. The Council is afraid. They've been managing this crisis for so long that they can't imagine any solution except more management. But management isn't enough anymore. Torres helped her stand. What did you see? Martinez walked to the window that looked out into space. In the distance, they could see the twisted reality storms that marked the heart of Devourer territory. I saw the beginning. The moment when everything went wrong. She pressed her hand against the window, and for a moment, the glass seemed to ripple like water. There was a species called the Architects. They built incredible things, cities that existed in multiple dimensions, technology that could reshape reality itself. They thought they had mastered the universe. The first ones, mentioned in the ancient records, Kethvar said. They tried to create a perfect universe, Martinez continued. One without entropy, without decay, without death. They built a machine that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics, but when they turned it on, something went wrong. Images began to form in the air around her. Projected somehow by her transformed consciousness, they showed a civilization at the height of its power, beings of pure energy working on a construction that spanned entire star systems. The machine worked, but not the way they intended. Instead of eliminating entropy, it created a temporal paradox. They became trapped in the moment of the machine's activation, forced to experience their own destruction over and over for eternity. Torres stared at the images. And this is what's causing the quantum instability? Their trapped consciousness is screaming across time, and those screams are tearing holes in reality itself. Every time the cycle repeats, the damage spreads a little further. The devourers are trying to contain it by consuming the affected areas, but they can't reach the source. Dr. Chen was studying the projections with fascination and horror. How do we fix something like that? We don't fix it, Martinez said. We heal it. The architects aren't evil. They're just trapped in an endless loop of pain. They need someone to help them break the cycle. And you think you can do that? Torres asked. Martinez turned to face them, and for a moment Torres could see something vast and alien looking out through her eyes. I think we can do that. Human consciousness is quantum flexible in ways that other species aren't. We can survive contact with paradoxical states of existence. The Council will not allow it, Kethvar said firmly. The risk of doing nothing is the end of everything, Martinez interrupted. I've seen the projections. The quantum cascade is accelerating. In less than 1,000 years, it will reach critical mass and collapse all of local space-time. She gestured, and new images appeared around them. Star charts showing the spread of quantum instability, like a cancer through the galaxy. The Devourers know this. That's why they're preparing for one final operation. They're going to try to amputate the entire affected region of space-time. Torres felt cold. How much of the galaxy are we talking about? All of it, Martinez said quietly. They're preparing to consume our entire galaxy to prevent the cascade from spreading to the rest of the universe. The medical bay fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Torres looked out at the stars, trying to imagine them all gone, sacrificed to save the rest of existence. When? He asked. Soon. They're already moving their forces into position. I'd estimate we have maybe 6 months before they begin the final consumption. Kethvar's crystal form was pulsing rapidly. This cannot be. The Council would have detected such preparations. The Council has been fighting the symptoms of the disease for 3 million years, Martinez said. They've never looked for the cause. The Devourers tried to communicate their true purpose, but no one could survive the contact long enough to understand. She walked over to a computer terminal and began entering data with impossible speed. But I can understand them now, and I can show them a better way. Torres watched the calculations appear on the screen. They were written in human mathematics, but they described concepts that human science had never encountered. What are you proposing? Instead of amputating the galaxy, we perform surgery on time itself. We go to the source of the cascade and help the architects break free from their temporal prison. When they're released, the paradox collapses and the quantum damage begins to heal. Dr. Chen was studying the equations with growing amazement. The energy requirements would be enormous. You'd need the power output of several stars just to reach the temporal anomaly. The Devourers have been gathering that energy for centuries, Martinez said. They were planning to use it for the final consumption. Instead, we convinced them to use it for the healing. And if the architects can't be saved? Torres asked. If breaking the temporal loop makes things worse? Martinez was quiet for a moment, her altered consciousness processing possibilities that normal humans couldn't comprehend. Then we try something else. But doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way, we have a chance. Kethvar moved closer to the computer terminal, his crystal form reflecting the light from the equations. The Council will see this as madness. The Council has been managing a slow defeat for 3 million years, Torres said. Maybe it's time to try something mad. He looked around the medical bay at the alien technology, the impossible mathematics, and the woman who had become something more than human to save everything that existed. "What do you need from us?" he asked Martinez. "A ship that can survive a journey to the temporal anomaly, a crew willing to risk everything, and a way to convince the Devourers to trust us with the most important operation in the history of the universe." Torres grinned. It was the same expression he had worn when humanity first decided to defy the Council's warnings. "I think we can manage that. How do we start?" Martinez closed her eyes and reached out with her transformed consciousness. Across space in the heart of Devourer territory, ancient creatures that had fought a hopeless war for millions of years suddenly felt something new. For the first time since the universe began to break, someone was offering them hope instead of fear. "We start by doing something no one has ever done before," Martinez said. "We ask the monsters if they want our help saving the universe." The response came immediately, transmitted through quantum channels that existed outside normal space-time. It wasn't words or images, but pure meaning impressed directly onto their consciousness. The Devourers were listening, and for the first time in millions of years, they were willing to try something other than consumption. Torres looked out at the twisted space where reality bent and broke under the weight of an ancient catastrophe. Somewhere out there, the fate of everything that existed was about to be decided. "All right, people," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We came here to fight an impossible war. Now we're going to try to save the universe instead. Anyone who wants to transfer to a safer assignment, speak up now." The silence that followed told him everything he needed to know about his crew. They had come too far to turn back now. The healing could begin. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of humanity's flagship, watching the impossible sight before them. The Nexus stretched across space like a wound in reality itself, a storm of broken time and twisted physics that had been screaming for millions of years. Around the flagship, the combined fleet of humans and Devourers moved in careful formation toward the source of the universe's pain. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Sleek human ships flying alongside creatures that looked like living darkness, working together to attempt the most dangerous mission in galactic history. "Final approach in 10 minutes, reported Captain Torres from the bridge. Elena had been promoted to overall fleet command when the operation began, while Torres handled the tactical details. Sarah Martinez stood beside Elena at the observation window. The quantum engineer had changed even more in the weeks since making full contact with the Devourers. Her eyes now held flecks of light that moved like distant stars, and she could see into dimensions that normal humans couldn't perceive. "They're afraid," Martinez said, referring to the architects trapped in the temporal storm. "They've been experiencing their own death for so long that they don't remember what it was like to be alive." Elena watched the reality storm twist and bend, occasionally showing glimpses of what lay within. Sometimes she could see the ghostly outlines of a vast machine, other times the shadows of beings frozen in their moment of greatest terror. "Can we really save them?" she asked. "I don't know," Martinez admitted, "but they deserve the chance to find out." Behind them, Dr. Chen was monitoring the approach from his position at the science station. "Quantum field readings are going crazy," he reported. "The temporal distortion is affecting our instruments from this distance." Ambassador Kethvar stood nearby, his crystal form dim with exhaustion. The alien had worked tirelessly to convince the Council to allow the mission, though they had officially classified it as an unauthorized military action. "My people still believe this is madness," he said quietly. "They think you are rushing towards certain death." "Maybe we are," Elena replied. "But if we don't try, death is certain anyway." Through the ship's communication system, they could hear reports from the other vessels in the fleet. Human crews were working alongside Devourer entities, sharing their quantum-flexible consciousness to help the ancient creatures navigate the treacherous space around the Nexus. Human vessel Courage reporting successful interface with Devourer Unit 7, came one transmission. "The connection is stable. We're ready for Phase 1. Elena opened the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. We're about to attempt something that's never been done before. We're going to heal a wound that's been bleeding for millions of years." She paused. looking out at the storm that contained the trapped consciousness of an entire civilization. Some of us won't make it back. But if we succeed, every intelligent being in the universe will owe their existence to what we do here today. The first phase of the operation began with human volunteers entering specially designed pods that would allow their consciousness to be projected into the temporal anomaly. They would need to make contact with the architects and convince them to accept help. Elena watched as the first pods launched from the human ships, each one carrying a brave soul willing to risk their sanity by communicating with beings trapped in a loop of infinite death. Lieutenant Commander Jackson was the first to make contact. His voice came over the communication system, distorted by the quantum interference but still recognizable. "Contact established," he reported. "I can see them. They're so afraid. They've been dying and being reborn over and over, for eons. They think we're another hallucination." Martinez moved to the communication station. "Tell them we're real," she said. "Tell them we're here to break the cycle." Through Jackson's neural link, Martinez began to communicate with the trapped architects. It was a conversation conducted in pure meaning, translated through human consciousness and quantum mathematics. "They don't believe us," Jackson reported after several minutes. "They've experienced false hope too many times. Every time they think they found a way out, they just loop back to the beginning." Elena could see the readings on Dr. Chen's instruments, showing the massive energy expenditure required to maintain even basic communication with the temporal anomaly. They didn't have much time before the quantum fields overwhelmed their systems. "Sarah," she said, "can you show them proof? Something that proves we're really here?" Martinez nodded and closed her eyes, reaching out with her transformed consciousness. Around the fleet, the Devourers began to respond, their dark forms shifting and flowing in patterns that created a kind of symphony in the quantum foam. For the first time in millions of years, the architects heard something other than their own, screams echoing through time. "They're listening," Jackson reported, his voice filled with wonder. "The Devourers are singing to them, telling them about the galaxies they've saved, the civilizations they've protected by containing the damage." The reality storm began to shift, its chaotic patterns organizing into something that almost resembled structure. Deep within the temporal anomaly, the architects were beginning to remember what it felt like to hope. "Phase 2, Elena announced. "Begin the healing process." This was the most dangerous part of the operation. Human volunteers would need to enter the temporal loop itself, sharing their quantum-flexible consciousness with the trapped architects to help them break free from their endless cycle of death and rebirth. Martinez was the first to volunteer. "I have the most experience with temporal quantum states," she said. "If anyone can survive the loop, it's me." But before she could enter her pod, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Dr. Chen was staring at his instruments in horror. "The cascade is accelerating," he reported. "The quantum instability is spreading faster than our models predicted. We have minutes, not hours." Elena felt her heart sink. They had planned for a careful, methodical healing process that would take days to complete safely. Now they had to choose between rushing the operation and risking everything, or watching the universe begin its final collapse. "All volunteers, emergency insertion," she ordered. "Sarah, you're our best hope. Do whatever you have to do." Martinez nodded and climbed into her pod. Around the fleet, dozens of other human volunteers did the same, preparing to dive into a temporal storm that existed outside of normal causality. "For everyone we've ever loved," Martinez said as her pod sealed. "For everyone who will ever be born." The pods launched directly into the heart of the Nexus, carrying human consciousness into a realm where time moved in circles and death was just another word for transition. Elena watched the readings as Martinez and the others made contact with the architect's trapped consciousness. At first, the patterns on the screen showed chaos and confusion. Then, slowly, something beautiful began to emerge. The human volunteers were not just communicating with the architects. They were sharing their memories, their hopes, their stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. They were showing the trapped beings what it meant to be alive, what it meant to choose hope over despair. "It's working, Doctor," Shen whispered. The temporal loop is destabilizing. The architects are remembering how to exist in linear time. Through the observation window, Elena could see the reality storm beginning to calm. The chaotic swirls of broken space-time were organizing themselves into something that resembled normal physics. And then, for the first time in millions of years, the architects spoke in voices that weren't screams of pain. "We remember," came the transmission, carried through quantum channels that suddenly made perfect sense. "We remember what we were trying to build, not a perfect universe. A universe that could heal itself." The machine at the center of the nexus began to change, its reality-warping energies shifting from destruction to restoration. Instead of breaking the laws of physics, it began to repair them. Elena watched in amazement as the quantum cascade that had been spreading through the galaxy suddenly reversed direction. Space-time that had been damaged for millions of years began to heal itself, guided by the consciousness of beings who had learned to transform their greatest mistake into their greatest gift. "The Devourers are changing," Torres reported from the bridge. "They're not just entities of entropy anymore, they're becoming something new." Through the fleet, the ancient creatures that had consumed galaxies in their desperate attempt to save the universe were transforming into something unprecedented. They were becoming healers, using their reality manipulation abilities to repair the damage they had once been forced to contain. Martinez's voice came over the communication system, weak but triumphant. "We did it. The loop is broken. The architects are free." Elena opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. The mission is complete. The universe is healing." She looked out at space that was no longer twisted and broken, at reality that was remembering how to be stable and beautiful. The war that had raged for millions of years was finally over. Ambassador Keithvar approached the observation window, his crystal form glowing brighter than Elena had ever seen it. "The Council will want to understand how this was possible," he said.